Hi, everybody. Here is your Thursday poll question at Smerconish.com. Should retailers itemize tariff surcharges on customer bills? Should retailers itemize tariff surcharges on customer bills? First, however, thank you to my friends at Parks Casino in Shippensburg. Get lucky in no time at Parks Casino Shippensburg. That's exit 29 off Route 81 in central Pennsylvania. Parks Casino remains my casino of choice. Parks Casino Shippensburg. They celebrate military veterans every Monday. This is a cool deal. You show your military veteran ID, get a free hot dog lunch with chips and a soda as a thank you from Parks Casino Shippensburg. Every Tuesday, it's the Parks Casino 50% golden discount. Take my recommendation and check out all the action, entertainment, and excitement that they have to offer. Parks Casino Shippensburg is right in central Pennsylvania. It is 100% smoke-free. Every Friday is comedy night at Parks Casino. Brendan Donegan from True TV with special guest MC Dennis Owens. Whoa, our friend Dennis Owens from ABC 27. He's been a guest on my show. And comedian Matt Peoples. They've got it all going on. The free show starts at 8 p.m. and the show is for free. Live music every Saturday night in the side pocket. This Saturday, the Tans will take the stage. Go mingle. Go mingle at Parks Casino in Shippensburg. Get in on all the action just off Interstate 81. Visit parkscasino.com. You got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So, hello, everybody. Greetings on this Thursday. Let me first begin with a brief recap of the Wednesday poll question because there's an important update since we had dialogue here yesterday about this question. Should charter schools with religious affiliations be eligible to receive public funds? Should charter schools with religious affiliations be eligible to receive public funds? Or said differently, as I framed it yesterday, would you like to see the first religious charter school in the United States? Charter schools, remember, public, run privately. But this very important argument, I was so gratified yesterday that I made it the poll question of the day. And I'll tell you why. Tuesday night, I was contemplating a variety of different issues that I could have discussed. And I was reading in about this argument that was about to take place in the Supreme Court of the United States. And I thought, maybe not as, what's the word that I'm looking for? Maybe not as sizzling. That's a bad word choice. Maybe not as hot and talkative as other things that I could be raising with a more blatantly political angle, but I decided I would do it. And the conversation was great. And the voting yesterday was huge, 38,703 cast ballots. So clearly the case struck a chord. And then yesterday, in the course of the Wednesday news cycle, after the arguments were held in the Supreme Court of the United States and people began to grasp the significance of this case, I thought, I'm so glad that I aired it out because it may turn out to be as significant as I was thinking, notwithstanding the lopsided poll result, which I also predicted yesterday. Okay, Michael, enough. Tell us, what was the result? 80%, 80.13% voted no on the question of should charter schools with religious affiliations be eligible to receive public funds, which means 19.87%, a fifth, said yes. So here's the update on the argument from the Supreme Court yesterday. I'll give it to you in headlines. From SCOTUS blog, and I favor the reporting of Amy Howe because I think she does a great job. Supreme Court divided over approving first religious charter school. Amy Howe reports it was unclear at argument on Wednesday whether the Oklahoma Charter School Board had the votes of 5 justices it would need to overturn a state Supreme Court ruling that barred the establishment of an explicitly Catholic charter school in the state. If the court rules for the school board, St. Isidore of Seville will become the first publicly funded religious charter school in the country. But how Chief Justice John Roberts will vote, the key decision in the case, was not obvious by the end of the questioning. Then there's the New York Times headline. Supreme Court seems open to a religious charter school in Oklahoma. And then the headline from the Washington Post, Supreme Court majority seems open to religious public charter schools. So the close courtroom observers are not saying that it's a certainty that it will happen, but they are saying it's not an 80-20 no-brainer like the outcome of our poll question yesterday. It's not the no-brainer that our results made it out to be. And I wasn't asking you to be predictive. I didn't ask you what will the Supreme Court. I asked you what should they do. And 80-20, our audience said, don't do this. It doesn't seem that level of certain that the Supreme Court won't do it. Here, from the Washington Post, a divided Supreme Court on Wednesday appeared open to allowing the creation of the nation's first public religious charter school in Oklahoma, a blockbuster move that could reshape American education and redraw the boundary between church and state. By the way, I didn't express this clearly yesterday, but one of the concerns that I have about this case, one of the concerns I have is be careful what you wish for, because if today you're cheering on the involvement of the Catholic Church, ask yourself how you'll be feeling tomorrow if someone comes forth with a madrasa that they want public funding for as a charter school. But secondly, there was a caller yesterday who spoke of the mingling that comes from a public school education. And I'm the product of that level of mingling K through 12. I worry that if this is blessed, pun intended, by the Supreme Court, it's one less opportunity for people across different background lines to come together or have their kids come together. And I should have expressed that more yesterday. Okay, back to the Washington Post. A ruling for St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School would for the first time allow direct and complete taxpayer funding to establish a faith-based school sanctioning government sponsorship of a curriculum that calls for students to adhere to Catholic beliefs and the church's religious mission. It would be a giant step for the court's conservative majority in boosting the role of religion in public life. Pardon me, building on a series of rulings over the past decade affecting schools, the workplace, and the display of faith-based symbols on public property. The change could have vast and unpredictable implications for parochial, charter, and traditional public schools. It would almost certainly spark efforts to create similar schools in other states or convert existing religious private schools into public charter schools. But a ruling for St. Isidore could also prompt states that don't want to fund religious education to tighten their public charter policies. And then the story in the Washington Post goes on to say that there were sharp ideological differences that became clear during the course of the argument yesterday, with all three of the liberals expressing deep skepticism about religious charter schools, no clear indication that any conservative members of the court would join them in voting against this proposal. Remember, Amy Coney Barrett was sitting this one out. So consequently, you've got 8 justices who were hearing it. Chief Justice John Roberts, who is almost certain in the majority of the court's most significant cases, asked probing questions of both sides. So a 4-4 tie would keep the ruling in place of the Oklahoma State Supreme Court that this is unlawful. So that is your result from the Wednesday poll question. I'm just grateful that we were spot on in the timing of that question. I think we are spot on with the timing of today's question as well. And I'm asking the following at Smerconish.com. Should retailers itemize tariff charges, surcharges, on customer bills? Should retailers itemize tariff surcharges on customer bills? Notice I didn't say Amazon, but of course it's the Amazon case that I'm thinking of. The reason that I didn't specifically cite Amazon is because as I learned more about this yesterday and early this morning, I realized some retailers, I'm going to tell you about a funny one in just a moment. Some retailers are already doing this. Some retailers are already putting a tariff itemization on their bill. It's a funny story. Stick with me for just a moment. Background summary from Al Jazeera. Yes, I often rely on Al Jazeera's reporting for both domestic stories and international stories, particularly in the Middle East. The White House on Tuesday accused Amazon of committing a hostile and political act by planning to list extra tariff costs on its website. Amazon has disputed the allegation, saying it is not planning to display any added trade charges. And we talked about this yesterday at a news conference marking President Trump's 100 days in office. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt lashed out at Amazon over news reports suggesting that the company was considering displaying the added cost of tariff duties. Quote, why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest levels in 40 years? Asking, well, why isn't there a surcharge that says, here's the Biden inflation cost? So Amazon then denied the White House allegation. Its stock price sank briefly while all this was going on. And then what ended up happening, and it was Punchbowl News that initially reported this, they said that Amazon would soon display how much of an item's cost is derived from tariffs right next to the product's total listed price to illustrate how Trump's tariffs are affecting the cost of goods. Apparently, there was then a telephone conversation initiated by President Trump with Jeff Bezos. Amazon says that was an internal deliberation. We weren't really going to do it. The White House then, praised their move, yada, yada, yada. And Amazon is not doing this, or at least not doing this now. So it turns out, Amazon's not the first. Amazon is not the first. And others are saying, hey, Amazon, you should do this. And not only that, others ought to do what Amazon was at least contemplating. 2 weeks ago, from the Wall Street Journal, now comes the funny part of this story. From the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago, an extra fee is showing up on more shopping bills lately, and it carries a not-so-subtle message. These tariffs weren't our idea. From bathroom fixture makers to toy shops, companies are starting to track tariff surcharges and tack them onto invoices as a separate line item. Some are a $5 flat fee. Others represent as much as 40% for the subtotal. The tactic is a way to pass on at least some tariff costs to consumers, especially on Chinese-made goods with levies totaling 145% since January. Remember the whole debate that we've had, and since we started talking about tariffs months ago here, is the reality that we pay them. Do you remember the bike salesman who called in from the South? I have one of his bikes, and he said, I've got, crates of bikes, and they're overseas, and I can't afford to get them. And if I do get them, I've got to pass along. In that case, I think it was a 35% tariff. So, you've got these retailers saying, we want the public to know this. A quote from Ryan Barbazine, chief executive of Jolie, which sells high-end filtered shower heads. Quote, we think transparency is the way to go here, and I am giving Trump full credit for his decision to add the tariff. He plans to add a Trump liberation tariff to the online orders in the coming weeks. Just how much, he said he wasn't sure. Okay, now here's the funny one. Then there is Dame, that would be D-A-M-E, which bills itself as a sexual wellness company. They have added what they call a Trump tariff surcharge of $5 to their orders. It decided on the flat fee earlier this month when the Trump administration initially imposed a 54% tariff rate on China, about a third of the current total. To make extra clear who is responsible for the additional cost, the line item includes a tiny image of a hairpiece that resembles President Trump's swept-over style. There's a quote from Alexandra Fine, who is the chief executive. It doesn't cover the full cost, not even close, but it felt better than pretending everything is fine. Dame's vibrators are made in southern China. She said that she would need to consider raising, the CEO, the tariff surcharge if the Chinese import tariff remained at 145%. It's about the statement. She said, we want to let people know how these policies are impacting us. Okay, my favorite comment My favorite comment was then appended to this story in the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago. Randy posted a comment and said, "So, a sex toy company is documented how we're all getting screwed by China. Priceless." To which someone else then added, "Who says the Wall Street Journal doesn't have a sense of humor?" Allison Schrager is a columnist for Bloomberg, and she is among those who have weighed in and said, stepping back now and reflecting on what went on with Amazon yesterday, hey, what a shame they backed off. This idea is a good one that is now catching on with other retailers, ergo Dame, the sexual pleasure people, and Amazon itself already lists state sales taxes separately at checkout. So why not include a tariff, which is just another form of taxation? It's hardly surprising that the Trump administration would prefer that customers not know how much tariffs are costing them. The president has long insisted that the cost will be borne by foreign countries, but historically, tariffs are at least partially paid by consumers. And taxes have long been listed separately in America, unlike in Europe, where the VAT is automatically added to the sticker price. Listing a tariff tax alongside a sales tax would be more consistent with how pricing usually works and is better for consumers. In other words, the transparency argument. Why wouldn't retailers tell us exactly how much of the cost that we're paying is attributable to this current political debate? Others have written similarly on the subject. I recommend Rex Hupke's piece in USA Today making the same observations. Quote, "It must be embarrassing for a Trump butt-kissing billionaire like Bezos to see his company accidentally tell the truth." So to help with that, I've written a statement Amazon officials are free to use to apologize to their customers. And then he has a humorous statement that he suggests that they send out. And then finally, one more. The Wall Street Journal lead editorial today on exactly this issue. Under the headline, "Trump versus Amazon's brilliant tariff idea." They give the background on the story, but I've already done that a couple of times. The Wall Street Journal observes the following. Ride-sharing platforms understand this very dynamic. After each trip, riders get an itemized bill that shows how much of their fare went to tolls and political fees. So do hotels when they list a local tax. Mr. Trump likes to say that foreign exporters bear all the costs of tariffs with none passed on to the customers. Economists disagree. In a 2020 study showing that final customers bear the burden of Trump's first-term tariffs. Levitt accused Amazon of playing politics, but like taxes, tariffs often add a precise dollar figure to a sticker price, and voters who pay little attention to the macro economy will notice a direct markup on items they buy. Consumers are already feeling the tariff pain, whether or not retailers quantify it on their websites. White House denials aren't going to change that, but repealing the tariffs would. Okay, that is the poll question of the day today on this Thursday at Smerconish.com. Should retailers itemize tariff surcharges on customer bills? If you're for that display of the tariff charge being shown to customers, you're going to make the point of customer and consumer awareness. Increasing transparency helps consumers understand, therefore they can make informed decisions. It's also about accountability because it encourages retailers to be more accountable for pricing and may lead to more competitive pricing. And it also provides an economic education opportunity to learn about the impact of this international trade policy for consumers. If you're against it, I guess you're saying it's too complex, that it's very hard to discern exactly how much of the Trump policy equates with the add-on of your sexual pleasure or your bicycle or your widget, that there's an administrative burden because it increases the workload for those retailers to have to figure it out. It may cause some consumer angst, lead to unnecessary concerns about fluctuating prices. And finally, I'm trying to just spitball here and give you some arguments against it. Market dynamics, the idea that retailers may prefer flexibility in pricing rather than itemizing costs that could fluctuate frequently. Like, how are they going to keep up with it in a world of Trump where it's on again, off again, on again, off again? So, my friends, now you're equipped. Go vote on the Thursday poll question at Smerconish.com. Should retailers itemize tariff surcharges on customer bills? I expect, like yesterday, there's no other way I could word it that I could think of that would generate an even divide. I expect it's going to be lopsided, as was yesterday's vote on St. Isidore, potentially the first religious charter school in the nation, but it makes it no less important a poll question. Even though the vote might be lopsided, it's important that everybody weigh in. So go do that, and go do that right now. Thank you. Please like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe. I appreciate you and hope that you've set yourself up for notifications, particularly in those instances where, I want to say something and it's not right on the schedule of our normal get-togethers. So like and subscribe and set yourself up for notifications. And thank you for all of that. Go vote.